we had several cases early on that went very well. We were able to find a child in pretty short order, and that led to some law enforcement agencies, saying thank you, being grateful for the help, and then that led to those law enforcement agencies calling at later dates and saying, hey, listen, we need help with this. Can you help us? And everything just kind of spiraled from there. And it was one word of mouth referral after another to the point to where, as you previously brought up, we get calls now from law enforcement agencies working along the border in Texas and Arizona mostly.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Going Beyond the Deal podcast. Today, we have Trent Steele, the president and chairman of the Anti-Predator Project. Trent is a president of a non-for-profit that is actively trying to eliminate human trafficking in this world. Most people don't realize that human trafficking is probably one of the largest businesses in the world. And when we say, 300 billion, 400 billion, that's what's trackable. That's what's trackable. I mean, this is one of the, unfortunately, one of the biggest businesses in the world. So it's very important for us to have this conversation. It's a little bit different than what we typically had on the show, but it's something that's, if you're a parent, a husband, a child, any type of person in this world that has half a heart could really relate and be touched by this subject. So we're going to talk about what it takes to run a non-for-profit that's going out there and doing really great things for the world, some of the challenges of this type of work, and then how you can actively get involved with supporting the industry. This great organization. So without further ado, Trent Steele and the Anti-Predator Project. All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Going Beyond the Deal podcast. I'm your host, Michael Fischer. I have our guest today, Mr. Trent Steele, the president and chairman of the Anti-Predator Project. A little bit of a different type of guest that we would have on the podcast, but a great guest nonetheless. Really interesting mission. Something that's very important in this world right now. But also, we're going to talk about the challenges of running a non-for-profit, agency and the challenges in growing something like that. But, I first have to say, Trent, you definitely have the most badass name in the world. Best guest name that we have ever had on here. So you get that first.
Thank you so much. I should have gone the movie star route, I suppose, with this name.
Yeah, well, hey, I mean, I think it'll open a lot of doors, but no, that's for sure. So, I really don't want to butcher this and not explain it the best way possible, but can you explain to us at a very high level what the Anti-Predator Project is?
So we are a private intelligence firm, and we specialize in all things human trafficking, missing children related. So we hold private investigation licenses in Florida, Texas, and Arizona. We also operate in conjunction with our partners at the International Association of Human Trafficking Investigators, the Human Trafficking Technology and Intelligence Centers, which is our office location in Miami is where I'm sitting at now. So through these centers, we've partnered with between 15 and 20 of the best software companies from around the world, and we're able to bring cutting-edge technology to law enforcement for free. So everything from different types of facial recognition, ad ID tracking on cell phones, link analysis programs, all sorts of that stuff. We're able to bring to law enforcement for absolutely free through these centers. You can't see behind me here, but I got a big digital board on the wall. We're able to remote into any law enforcement agency around the world, actually, if we need to, bring our expertise to them, once again, at no charge. Or if we have to, if it's a complicated enough situation, we'll put somebody on a plane and fly an expert to them.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I mean, this is definitely interesting for me. Trent and I were introduced by, a mutual friend. And, as a husband, as a dad of a beautiful 6-year-old little girl, this really, hits home for me. So, what I'd really like to come out of this is just to, put the spotlight on what I think is a very important organization. And I want to give some color and clarity around how big of a industry the human trafficking industry is, right? And a lot of things that it is that we don't necessarily and fully understand, and I think that would be very impactful for people.
No,
So
absolutely.
Trent, so let's get into like your background. Like, how did your background, like, what did you do? Where'd you graduate from college, and kind of how did you get to where you are today?
So I started my college career at the University of Iowa, go Hawks,
Yeah.
and then ended up finishing online through Purdue University. So
Nice.
swapped from one Big Ten school to the other.
Yeah.
So that's where I ended up graduating from. Started my career in a government contracting firm doing uh, high value asset protection, counterterrorism stuff. Left and became a social worker for about 7 years.
Why did you do that? Why did you leave such a crazy and exciting career? I mean, not that social work isn't an exciting career, but like that's a really big fluctuation. What'd you make
Uh,
the change for?
so, I wanted to get into something that gave back a little bit.
Okay.
I wanted a job that was maybe a little bit bigger than me. And so
Okay.
I got into social work. I started working with kids in foster care in Miami. And my particular job at that social work agency was working with kids that were aging out of foster care. So teaching
Interesting.
them how to balance their checkbook, how to sign a lease, all the adulting things that none of us like to do. Through that opportunity, I had the ability to work with several teenage girls that had been human trafficking victims, and their stories were absolutely horrific. I worked with a young lady whose pimp made her tattoo his name on her eyelids. I worked with another young lady who had been branded like a cattle with an iron coat hanger, and so their stories were very impactful. So that's when I started realizing maybe first of all, there needs to be something done about this,
Yeah.
right? And that I maybe knew some people and had the ability to maybe do that. So my wife and I founded this organization back in 2012 when I was still working in foster care. And, at first it started off with very simple cases, a missing child case here, there, very simple stuff. Would be a parent would call and say, listen, little Johnny or Susie's missing. We'd find them 6 hours later out on the beach smoking weed with their friends, because they got pissed
Yeah.
off because their parents took their cell phone. That evolved, and we started getting more and more complex cases, and all of a sudden it was not parents that were calling anymore. It was law enforcement agencies that were calling and asking for help. And the cases went from one runaway kid to my loved one is being held against their will at a location somewhere in the United States, being forced to perform different sex acts. We need to get her out. How can you help? We don't know how to find her. And then that has evolved into us working and being involved in some very large scale organized crime cases involving different organized crime bodies from around the country. We've spent a ton of time down on the border along Texas and Arizona, working with the organized crime bodies down there, and then obviously up and down the East Coast, from New York down to Miami, with all sorts of organized crime there. And we've been involved with everybody from local, state, and federal law enforcement on these cases. So it's been something that over the last 13 years has gone from something that was a few hours a week to something that now is well above full time every week.
So how did it go from, the example you gave of just, a parent calling, hey, my 15-year-old is missing. Can you help us find it? How did it go from that to, I mean, you explained to me briefly, I mean, like going across the border to get someone out of the situation. How, what do you attribute that kind of growth, from, what do you attribute that to?
So honestly, word of mouth. So we had several cases early on that went very well. We were able to find a child in pretty short order, and that led to some law enforcement agencies saying thank you, being grateful for the help. And then
Mhm.
that led to those law enforcement agencies calling at later dates and saying, hey, listen, we need help with this. Can you help us? And everything
Yeah.
just kind of spiraled from there. And it was one word of mouth referral after another to the point to where, as you previously brought up, we get calls now from law enforcement agencies working along the border in Texas and Arizona mostly. And they say, listen, we've got an issue that has drifted across the border. Can you help us out with that? They know we've got people that have worked both sides of the border. And so, we end up sometimes having to go south of the border to do things that American law enforcement can't. So that's how that kind of all worked out. And that's I'll give 100% credit to my team that I work
Yeah.
with. This is
Yeah.
not a one man show. I work with some of the finest men and women from around the world that have backgrounds that they could go anywhere and command a 6-figure, 7-figure salary easy. They come and they volunteer their time here for us, with us for free, because they believe in the mission, and their skill set and their abilities are what make all this possible. And they're the ones that are able to do these things and make them happen.
How big is your team now?
We've got about 40-ish volunteers from coast to coast. And those volunteers don't just include operations people. We
Mhm.
also have our own family and victim services group that's headed up
Okay.
by a wonderful volunteer. We have an outreach group. So we've got several different divisions, but all in all, about 40 volunteers coast to coast.
Okay. The one thing that I think would be really helpful, and I had asked you this question previously, but just for the listeners, can you give us a real clear understanding, from the definition all the way to just examples of what is human trafficking?
So if you ask most people, the reality is a lot of people in this country have absolutely no idea what human trafficking is, right?
Exactly.
Because it doesn't affect them. This is a problem that is largely a deal where if it doesn't affect me or my
Mhm.
family or somebody directly that I know, we just tend to kind of walk past it and forget about it, right? But then there's the other half of the people that are going to see the Hollywood version of human trafficking. We've all seen the movie Taken. We've
Yeah.
all seen the movie The Equalizer, all of that stuff,
Yeah.
right? So then there's going to be that. And then there's what the reality of human trafficking in the United States is, and that is almost all the victims of HT in the United States are domestic. Most human trafficking victims go home and sleep in their own bed at night. They're not being tied up and they're not being chained to a wall. And it's about that we know of, it's about 150 to 250 billion dollar a year global industry, right? So when you talk about why it's not getting any better and why things aren't improving, follow the money, right? Human trafficking, and a few years ago, people were saying, well, human trafficking is the second most profitable crime behind narcotics trafficking, and that
Mhm.
was a couple of years ago. I can promise you now, I've not seen the newest numbers, but I will promise you now that human trafficking, dollar for dollar, is the most profitable illegal crime in the world. There's between 150 and 200 billion dollars a year global trade in this world that we know about. So those are the numbers that we know about and we can guesstimate. A vast majority of human trafficking dollars are dollars that aren't trackable or traceable. So
Yeah.
if you start adding those into the equation, you're looking at an industry that's probably closer to 500 billion, 600 billion dollars globally. And
Wow.
so when you put it into business perspective, right, and you look at it from a business standpoint, think about this. All over this country, every night there's a gas station clerk that's probably shot or assaulted over $50 in a gas station register. What are
Mhm.
people willing to do to protect a $500 billion a year global industry? And when you're talking about a $500 billion a year global industry, that's not your average Joe's being involved in this. There's some major power players, major business brokers from around the world that are involved in this. So the problem is much greater and much deeper than what I think anybody even understands. Even those of us in the business that work this
Yeah.
every day, we get a little bit more taken back by some of the level of people that are involved in this. People that don't have to be, but they choose to be.
Got it. So, I mean, with the exception of like what we see on television between, I mean, everything that's been really prominent right now between Epstein and Puff Daddy or Diddy or whatever he calls himself these days. I mean, the only thing that you think about, what most people think about in human trafficking is sex work and things like that. But can you give us the broader definition of human trafficking, and so that people have a clear understanding of what this industry is fully made up from? It's not just the sex industry.
No, absolutely. The sex portion is what is obviously marketed to the public via Hollywood
Yeah.
and everything else, because that's the, uh, I guess, for lack of better terms, the sexy part of it, right? The part that gets clicks. But
Yeah.
uh, the legal definitions to get human trafficking, you've got to meet three criteria: force, fraud, or coercion. All right. So, and it's force, fraud, or coercion to get somebody to perform a sex act, to do a labor activity. Down here in South Florida, we're in a very unique spot because we've got South Beach, we've got downtown Miami. That's very much the hub for a lot of sex tourism, the nightclubs, the strip clubs, things like that, right? So we've got
Mhm.
that portion of it. But also in downtown Miami and also down on South Beach, we've got the labor part of it, where we've got people that are being forced to work in hotels for no money. We've got people that are being forced to work in restaurants for no money. Then if you drive about 30 miles south in Dade County, you get to the rural area called the Redlands. And down there, you've got people that are being forced to work on farms, pick fruit, for very, very little prices. And a few years ago, there was a big ICE raid down in the Redlands. I want to say they had about 40-ish El Salvadorian men that were being forced to pick strawberries for 25 cents a flat. That's all they were being paid, because the rest of their money was going, according to the people that were trafficking them, to room and board, to their, pay their debts. So
Mhm.
that's where the force, fraud, and coercion comes, right? So they're being told that, you're going to come work in the fields, but we're taking a portion of your money to cover your debt. I'll give you another example. When I was working in foster care, we had a young man that came in, and he was a very good kid, and he never caused any problems. He was always home for by curfew every night, but we could not get him to go to school, not for anything. We begged him, we pleaded, listen, you've got an opportunity to go to school, to get an American education. Why aren't you? And so finally he comes clean and said, and he was down in the fields working, farming. And finally he comes clean and says, well, I have to send X amount of dollars back home every month, or they're going to the people that brought me here are going to burn my mom's house down in El Salvador. And so that's another disputed thing that we've got going on in this country, the way the mainstream media pitches things, right? The mainstream media doesn't always do us many favors. So, a few years ago, we had the mainstream media that was, touting this whole narrative of we had kids in cages. And now they're coming back to the narrative that we're separating families at the border, and that and I've got a very unique perspective on this, because I've worked this both from a criminal investigator standpoint and from a social work standpoint.
Mhm.
The vast majority of these children that are coming across the border, I would say 90% above, are not being brought here by their families. They are being brought here by coyotes. Coyotes that the families in their countries paid to bring here because they're trying to get their child a better life. So they're being paid. So this is not an aunt or an uncle. This is not a mom or a dad that's usually bringing these children across the border. And the reason that we separate these kids is for reasons like this. This kid we had in foster care, right? Everything looked good. Allegedly, what we ended up finding out is the uncle that he was living with, that was supposed to be a good guy, was never really his uncle. It was a guy that worked for the coyotes, that was monitoring the situation, that was taking this young man's money so they didn't burn his mom's house down in El Salvador. So nobody's separating these families. These aren't families that are coming across. These kids are being taken away from these bad people for their own good. And
Yeah.
that's a narrative that's not, the media is not being honest about, and that it's not being portrayed accurately.
Got it. Got it. So can you just, that actually that helps out a lot, and it makes it very, very clear. So, in a situation like that, you know, prior to this, you obviously were a social worker and you were interacting with these kids directly. How would then someone leverage, the Anti-Predator Project, in a situation like this. Can you explain to the listeners how somebody would engage you, and then just kind of walk us through a typical process?
So this is one of the reasons why we were formed, actually, is because of issues like this.
Mm-hmm.
There are things that law enforcement sometimes has trouble doing, and it's not because they're not capable.
Mm-hmm.
It's because a lot of times law enforcement's bound by compliance issues. They're bound by certain laws. They're bound by resources,
Mm-hmm.
and so there's a lot of things that sometimes they're unable to do that we
Mm-hmm.
can do, and that's why our motto, our company motto, is standing in the void of justice, because we're not here to do law enforcement's job for them. We're here to help law enforcement do their job. We're here to make law
Yep.
enforcement's job easier. So in cases like that, that one obviously was a very simple law enforcement case. We were able to get law enforcement involved in that one right away,
Mm-hmm.
and we were able to get the uncle the alleged uncle, right, put in handcuffs and get this kid moved to a safer location. But I'll give you another example. There are times when there's stuff that's reported to law enforcement that they just simply don't have time to follow up on
Mm-hmm.
because of once again, compliance rules. They're understaffed, overworked. So a few years ago, we had a young family that contacts us and says, "Hey, listen, we've got our cousin. She's 23. She met this guy online. Last time we heard from her was 3 months ago. We don't know where she's at. Her cell phone goes straight to voicemail. We're worried about her safety."
Mm-hmm.
We reported it to law enforcement. Law enforcement has told us she's an adult. It's not a crime to be missing as an adult. If you want to just walk away from your life, you can do that. There's no signs of foul play. So it was an issue where law enforcement, not because they don't care about this young lady being missing, it comes down to what they're able to do. They've got 50 active cases involving juveniles and other things on their desk. They just simply don't have the manpower or the resources to try to figure out what happened to a 23-year-old girl that just simply appears to have walked away from her life.
Mm-hmm.
So we got involved. We were able to use some of the technology that we've got here, some facial rec stuff, and we found out using our facial recognition software, once we threw this young lady's face in there, we found out that she started popping up on all sorts of pornographic websites. And what we were able to find out, it was through about an 8 or 9 month long investigation. What we were able to find out is this young lady met a guy online that took her to Arizona, was holding her hostage in a house where he was forcing her to do pornographic material, OnlyFans, a couple of other things. And he had the Cash App and all the other payment mechanisms set up to go directly to his bank account. And he bounced her around between 3 or 4 different houses. And he had the windows covered so she could never see where she was at. Every time he moved her, he would put a bag on her head and drive her from one house to the other. So we were able to actually recover this young lady. It took us about 8 months, but we were actually able to get her recovered. When we found her, she was in Phoenix, Arizona. So she wound up from Tampa to Phoenix, Arizona. But that's an example of a case where we get involved not because law enforcement doesn't care. They just don't have the time, manpower, or resources to help that family. So that's how we get involved in a lot of cases.
So then, from there, once this young lady was recovered, are you guys then helping her and her family to kind of get her transitioned back into normal life, or, helping her connect her with the right people to help her in this,
Yes.
this recovery process?
Yes. We've got, just like I spoke earlier, we've got a victim and family services group, and they help get survivors connected with housing, medical care, mental health care, whatever they need, counseling.
Yeah.
And we, wherever they're at in the country, we find providers that will work with us. We also help, with housing and all over the country, wherever we can help them with. So we've got a group that within our organization that does help with that.
That's amazing. That's amazing. So, for you, just to transition, to the next segment here, what are the biggest challenges that you face in this line of work?
Well, so that's a loaded question because there's a lot of different challenges. There's challenges when it comes to the actual work itself, right? To the criminal investigation stuff and all of that. but then there's challenges in the business aspect of this as well.
Yeah. Because I mean, I
So
would imagine for me, I would think, like you have this win, right? You found this girl in Arizona. Her, police said, look, this isn't against the law for her to be gone, right?
mhm.
You did the research, you found her. Thank God you found this poor woman that went through all this. But then you come to realize and sit down and go, this is one of thousands.
Yep.
I don't even want to shortchange this. And it's like, man, I wish we could do more. Right? There's only so much you can do.
So then that comes down to the business side of this.
Yeah.
So I'll walk you through the challenges we've got on both sides of the house. And I'll start with the actual operations side. So part of the actual operations side ties into the business side, and a lot of it is manpower.
Yeah.
For instance, we're in the middle of a organized crime investigation right now, where one of the things that we really need to be able to do is to run surveillance on a certain group of people.
Mhm.
That takes manpower, that takes time, that takes money. Right now, we don't have enough to get that done. So that's one of the that's one of the examples of where we've got an operation that's being affected by the business side of the house. Now, on the operations side, some of the other challenges that we're facing right now are, finding enough law enforcement partners to work with, because they're overburdened, they're overworked, and they're telling us, listen, we've got all these cases. We've actually got law enforcement agencies coming to us now with cases saying, we don't have the bandwidth to work these. Is there any way you guys can work them and bring them back to us with enough to build a criminal case? So we've got several cases like that. And then obviously there are some parts of the country that are more friendly to working these investigations than others. So, we've got those challenges on the operations side of the house. On the business side of the house, it's the same challenge that everybody that runs a business has, right? It's money. And we just spoke about the fact that human trafficking is anywhere between a $400 to $600 billion a year global business. Some of these organized crime groups that we're working have literally unlimited resources because of the amount of money that they make. They buy politicians, they buy law enforcement, they buy resources, security that's trained in surveillance, counter surveillance. They have the ability to buy assets that most small nations can't. And so, to put it into business terms, right? You look at a company like Walmart. Walmart comes into a market, and it's well known. They'll take a loss on anywhere between 20 to 30% of the things that they sell for the first several years, just because they know that if they do that, eventually they're going to stomp anybody that's in competition with them out of business. And so when we're going to war with these huge organized crime entities, and we've got an operating budget of about $200,000 a year against their 100 million, 200 million, it really puts us at a disadvantage. Because, luckily we've got some great tech companies that are giving us some tools for free that we couldn't otherwise afford. So that helps narrow the gap a little bit, but it doesn't help narrow the gap with law enforcement, with manpower and things like that. So we're always trying to figure out how we can get, more money in the bank, how we can leverage our resources, our assets to be more effective, to do more with less. We've quite frankly become, in my opinion, the industry leaders in doing more with less. The things we've been able to accomplish on our budget has been, quite remarkable. And I'll give you an example. I told you about a girl a couple of years ago that we went to Mexico and got and brought back. She'd been missing from Florida for over a decade. We went and got her, and since then she'd had 2 kids. Able to get her and her 2 kids back. That operation out of pocket was nearly 50 grand. By the time we finished paying plane tickets, by the time we finished paying equipment, it's Mexico. We had to pay some bribes. By the time we finished paying all of that, it was nearly a $50,000 out of pocket operation. So, and that's just one operation, right? So when you're looking at it on a good year, our operating budget's 200 grand. And so that's 50 grand. That's, a quarter
And it's
of
all
our budget.
donations and fundraising?
Yes, it's all donations and fundraisers. We're a 501c3. Nobody in the 13 years we've been doing this, 12 years we've been doing this, there's been absolutely nobody that's ever gotten an invoice from us. Not a family, not a law enforcement agency. And we'll stay that way, because the other reality is this: a vast majority of the families that we deal with are not rich. They don't have a lot of money.
Yeah.
And the average price, depending on where you're at for a private investigator, the cheapest you're going to find is about $100 an hour. But, here in South Florida, you're going to be paying 200 plus an hour. That bill racks up fast. The average family can't pay that. So that's why we make sure that our services are free, because we know that families can't afford that. That's why we call ourselves a charity. So we want to make sure that we're providing the best service possible with what we've got. But the challenges on the business side of the house are finding new and creative ways to get funding in the door. We're working on ways to use some for-profit businesses to try to drive the nonprofit. So we have X amount of dollars we know coming in every year. So we're trying to work on some creative ways to get a constant flow of money in, to get some money in the door. But that's the constant challenge on the business side of the house is how do we keep the lights on? How do we keep the doors open? And how do we keep this ship moving forward?
Yeah. That's the crazy thing, though, is if you had more resources, there's only more people that you could save, right? So that's the thing. Yeah. We'll definitely have to talk about this offline, because I think there's some ideas that I have in my mind,
Yeah. No, absolutely. It's the age old question with every business. And then the reality of our business is, if we had more money, if we had more resources, we could just make the world that much of a better place.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, for you, how has this shaped you personally, from doing what you did, for profit when you came out of college, very exciting, asset protection, all this kind of stuff. And then, you had the opportunity to get into more of a life of service, when you were, working in the foster care system and things like that. And then now with this, how has this work shaped you personally?
That's also a loaded question, right? I'll tell you one thing that it's done is it's given me a lot of perspective in life.
Mhm.
You when you're young, you think you've got the world figured out. You think,
Yeah.
man, and then, you have one bad day and the world's falling apart. Man, this sucks. You get down on yourself. Between working in foster care and dealing with families that, were going through horrible things, and you know, one of my foster kids that I had, he went on and is doing some great things now. But he came into foster care because literally everybody in his life that was supposed to care for him died. His mom was killed in a car accident when he was younger. His aunt had him. His aunt died of cancer. Then his grandma had him, and his grandma died of cancer. Like, everybody in this kid's life that was supposed to care for him died on him.
Yeah.
But yet he's the happiest kid you ever wanted to meet when I was working with him. He came in the office all the time. He was in a good mood, and then, now moving on to this, right? I've spent a ton of time on the southern border the last few years. I've worked with victims that have been, part of horrific crimes. I've worked with, families who have lost it all. You think you've experienced a tragedy, and then, you got to give some parents the news that they got to bury their child. And, one thing that's really a case that really has helped me put this into perspective over the years is, we had a case a few years ago, another girl from Mexico, only this one came back dead. And there was a family that had no money. And this is why, I've got such a big beef with our political system, with our media, because this is a perfect example. This girl comes home, she's deceased. Family has no money, not even enough money to bury this young lady. So I'm calling, I called senators, I called governors, I called everybody I could think of. Nobody wanted to pay for this young lady's funeral. Nobody. I finally found a group out of Pennsylvania that would cover the funeral costs. I went out to see the family, and the only people that attended the funeral, I was unfortunately unable to make it, but the FBI agent that worked on that case with us attended the funeral. Only him, nobody else from the office attended. And then the family and the priest were the only ones that attended this young lady's funeral. And this young lady had died a horrible death at the hands of the cartel. She was tortured. And then on top of that, after she was deceased, the cartel members that did this, they made them the photo of them executing this young lady, their Facebook profile page, and then tagged the mom in the photo. So the mom had to look at this. So I was there about a week after the funeral, and I was gonna take him out to dinner, and the mom comes out and she sits next to me, and she's got this big box of, you know how when you have funerals, you got the little cards and the programs that people give out. And she hands this big box to me and she says, Trent, listen, I want you to take these because I don't have anybody else to give them to. And let me tell you something. You think you're having a bad day, and that puts it all into perspective, right?
Yeah.
You're dealing with a parent who not only lost a child, but lost a child in the most horrific and egregious way possible. Can't even get a politician, a state government, anybody to even help pay for the funeral. This family's got nothing. And now she's giving away the funeral placards because she simply doesn't have anybody else to give them to. And I keep those placards. I've got one in my office at home, and I'll have one down here at the center. But I keep one on my desk because it's a reminder of when things get hard and you want to throw your hands up in the air and quit. You pull that out and you realize, number one, it reminds you why you're doing it. And it reminds you that no matter how bad your day is, somebody's having a worse day. So it's really helped shape my view of the world. And everybody says, man, Trent, all the things that you got to see, don't you lose faith in humanity? And you want to, because you want to say, man, the world's a horrible place. It's tough to deal with this. But then I remember the men and women that I work with, and these people that do a very dangerous job that don't have to, and they do it for free, and they don't have to. And you're reminded very quickly that, yeah, the world's got some bad people, and the world can be a tough place. But man, the world's got some excellent people too, and they're fighting for this place because they feel that it's worth fighting for. So if anything, I'm very grateful for my opportunity to be able to do this because it has helped transform my outlook on the world, how I view things, and now all of a sudden my bad days aren't so bad, and my good days are even better.
Yeah, that's very, very well said and great perspective. So, I mean, with all of that being said, I mean, what kind of legacy would you like to leave behind from, for the Anti-Predator Project? How do we continue this even when Trent Steele isn't even on this earth anymore?
Well, the ultimate hope would be we could eradicate human trafficking and it's no longer needed. That would be, I wake up every day wishing somebody would put me out of business and I can go spend the rest of my days fishing down in the Florida Keys. That would be the dream, right? The reality is that it's not getting any better. It's getting worse. There's more people in slavery right now around the world than there has been at any recorded time in history. So it's getting worse. But I'll say this: I hope that this organization outlives me, and that long after I'm gone, whoever takes the reins can continue helping people, changing lives. We're trying to make this world a better place, one case at a time, one family at a time. Yeah. And my hope is that will continue long after I'm gone.
Yeah. Well, we'll definitely do everything we can here to help promote it and raise more awareness for it. So, for you personally, I mean, I can't even imagine the level of intensity and stress that you have in your job, especially when people's lives are on the line, not knowing if someone is alive or dead, that you're working so hard to recover. How does Trent Steele find balance in his life?
That is also a loaded question because there are times I don't do a very good job of finding balance. I work a lot. And there are times I do that. Now I'm trying to do a lot better with that.
Yeah.
But one of the things that I do in my personal life is when I leave the four walls of this office or the office of my house,
Hmm.
there's nothing serious that happens in my life. I don't watch, very serious movies. I spend a lot of time watching comedy. I'm a huge comedy fan.
Yeah.
I go to a lot of comedy shows. I spend a ton of time doing that. I try to spend as much time as I can on the water down in the Keys.
Amazing.
That helps quite
Yep.
a bit. I spend a ton of time with my dogs and walking my dogs. And so I try to, when I'm not here, I try to not think about it as much as possible.
Got it. No, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, that's kind of, I mean, any other habits or routines that you do on a daily basis, like to kind of get you ready for the day?
Well, I was doing pretty good in the gym here until recently. My travel schedule kind of messes up my gym routine. But I try to get
Yeah.
in the gym as much as I can. And then I always take, whether I'm at the home office or whether I'm here, I always take the first 15 or 20 minutes in the office, listen to some music, have my smoothie in the morning, and just kind of, enjoy take a minute to enjoy life because it's a gift. It really is. And that's
It
one
really
thing that
is.
this whole job is taught me is that, every day on this earth is a true gift. And we don't know when it's going to be the last one. So every day there's a blue sky. I try to remember that and enjoy the blue sky as much as I can. And so I just try to be more grateful, honestly.
Yeah. No, it's living a life full of more abundance and gratitude is a real key, for anybody, right? To really get the most out of
Absolutely.
life.
Absolutely.
So I know you're when I ask this question, you're automatically going to, I know who you're going to say already, but I'm going to give you a little precursor here to say you can't say your wife, because I know your wife has been a big part of this journey with you and supporting
Absolutely.
you in starting this. But who has been outside of your wife, one of your key allies in this journey, and why?
Well, I'll tell you, without a doubt, it's my very good friend Jeremy Lewis over at the International Association of Human Trafficking Investigators. Him and I have been, fantastic friends for probably about the last decade.
Hmm.
He, he's a retired deputy from Pinellas County
Hmm.
and has really, been arm to arm with me in this whole battle against human trafficking. They've helped
Yeah.
us get resources. They've helped us make connections. They've helped us grow. Been very, very supportive. Without a doubt, without him, I'm not sure where we're at today. So I think he's been immense in what we're doing.
Very cool. Very cool. Another, kind of a personal question that I think would be very insightful for the listeners and for me, myself is, you know, you went from kind of a for-profit job to now something that's more profitable internally from your soul's perspective and what you want to give in this world. What advice would you give to someone who wants to make a real difference but doesn't know where to start or is afraid to start? Is there any advice that you'd give them?
You know, so I'm going to start with a very cliche saying, but I found it to be very true in my life. And they say that if you love what you do, you never work a day in your life. And that is, I've found that to be so true the last
Mhm.
decade plus of doing this. And so, it's interesting because I make not a ton of money, but I get up every day and I have the privilege of saying I get to go to work. I don't have to go to work. And there's so
Mhm.
many of us in this country every day that get up and we're like, man, we got to go to work today. And
Yeah.
we live for Fridays. We live for the weekend. And I
Yep.
remember being in that point
Yeah.
where, man, thank God it's Friday. I get a couple days off. Fridays mean nothing to me anymore. Why?
Yeah.
Because I usually work on the weekend, number one. But number
Mhm.
two, I don't dread going to work on Monday. So
Yeah.
Fridays, when you love what you're doing, you don't hate Mondays and you don't
Mhm.
love Fridays near as much. But the best advice that I can give anybody is I can getting the privilege to say you get to go to work and you don't have to go to work will far outweigh any paycheck you'll ever get. I know people that make uh, 20 times more money than I do, and they are very upset all the time. They're very stressed all the time. And so anybody that's willing, that wants to take that leap, that wants to do something more meaningful with their life, my best advice is to tell them to just do it, because you won't regret what happens in the end.
Yeah.
You just won't regret it. You won't regret the feeling of being able to wake up every day and be like, man, I can't wait to get to the office because we're changing lives today. I can't wait to get to the office because a bad guy's going to jail today. That's a very exciting feeling.
And I have a belief in this, that if you work towards fulfilling what your true calling and your true vocation is, if you will, that the universe will kind of work out in your favor, right? You won't
I
go
agree.
hungry. You won't go
I
without
agree.
joy and fulfillment, right? I think if you chase your natural vocation and your
100%.
natural purpose, things are going to work out, right? Now,
Absolutely.
if you choose something that's not in tune with what's better for the world, then
Yep.
I can't give you that advice, right? But if you're chasing something good, it's chances are
I
things are going
agree.
to work out for you.
Well, Albert, I think it was Albert Einstein said it, the two most important days of your life are the day you're born and then the day you find out why.
Yeah.
And I think that's a very true statement.
Very true. So, how can the listeners today, support the Anti-Predator Project? Donations, spreading the word, visiting the website. What's some actionable items that somebody can take to really help support you?
So obviously, donations, sponsorships, partnerships, we're always looking for a way to financially move forward and help expand our business. But, here's the thing. I also know we're in a tough economy. It's hard for people to donate.
Yeah.
One of the things that people can help, go to our social media on all our platforms. We got Facebook, X, Twitter. We've got Instagram. Share our stuff. Go share our stuff. Spread the word in your community to help fight human trafficking. Help put me out of business. Help fight it in your community. Help me achieve my dream of fishing in the Keys. So I don't have to do this every day anymore, right? And go visit our website. You can make a donation there. You can learn about what we're doing there. Go visit our social media. We have a clothing line called Apparel, where we sell T-shirts, hats, all sorts of stuff that help fund what we're doing. Go visit there. Go buy a T-shirt. Anything people can do. We got a volunteer form. If we've always got a home for volunteers. We do have requirements for volunteers on our operations team and on our victims team, but we can always find a home for somebody. We never turn down free help. That would be very unwise for an organization working on a $0 employment budget to turn down free help of any sort. So we always will take volunteers. Whatever people can do, if they can help financially, we're so appreciative. If they can volunteer, we're appreciative of that. But whatever people can do to help, go visit our website, go visit our social media. We're grateful for everything.
So we'll have it listed in the show notes, but just for everybody listening, it's www.antipredatorproject.org. And I think you can find it on the other, social channels as well.
If you just Google it, all our social media stuff comes up.
Very good. So Trent, I like to end the podcast with what I call the $1 million question that I give to everybody, because I love to hear the answers. When you look back on your journey, whether it be personally or professionally, what's one moment that felt really small at the time, but ended up changing everything for you?
The day I became a social worker.
Yeah.
It's really that simple. If I didn't take that job, I'm not here.
Yeah.
So something as simple as accepting a new job is what changed the course of history for me.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Well, thank you so much again to you, Trent. Trent Steele, Anti-Predator Project. Please go online, support them in any way that you can. And we appreciate you joining us today, Trent.
No, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. Have a great day.
You too, my friend.
Absolutely.